Welcome back to the show, folks. Today, we're taking a unique look at the American presidency, very timely, through the lens of personal finance. Our guest is wealth manager and tax attorney Megan Gorman, author of USA Today and publishes weekly bestseller, All the President's Money, How the Presidents Who Governed America Governed Their Money. She's here to share fascinating stories about how our presidents manage their own finances and what those stories tell us about their values and the challenges facing everyday Americans. Megan, welcome to the show.
Oh, my goodness. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. What inspired you to write a book about the personal finances of American presidents? What gap did you see that this book fills?
Yeah, it's funny. I think I've loved the president since I was 5. And of course, doing what I do, I'm obsessed with money. But what really inspired me, and, I'm talking to a Chicago radio station and podcast, is when I went to Springfield, Illinois, and went and saw Lincoln's house. And I realized he went from a log cabin in New Salem to the house on 8th and Jackson Street in Springfield in 7 years. And that house on 8th and Jackson was the nicest house in town. So that really got me thinking he must have been pretty clever with money to get that far that quick.
That is an amazing discovery, which is great. So the subtitle of your book is How the Presidents Who Govern America Govern Their Money. What's the connection, Megan, between how a president manages their personal finances and how they govern the country?
Absolutely nothing, which is sort of fun to realize. So really quickly, right? One of our worst presidents, Warren G. Harding. Would you believe it if I told you, Scott, he was one of our best presidents with money? And one of our best presidents, Thomas Jefferson, one of our worst presidents with money. So completely not correlated. Doesn't mean it doesn't help if they're good with money, but it's not a guarantee that they're good at running our money.
Oh, interesting. So many Americans might assume presidents are all wealthy and out of touch. Does your book reinforce that, or did you find that many presidents faced financial struggles that are relatable to everyday Americans?
Oh my goodness, they are so much like us, regardless of the era they lived in. They are up at 2 a.m. in the morning, worried about money. And that's actually a quote from LBJ to a friend in the 1940s. So very similar to us in all the stresses that they had. And a lot of our presidents were born poor, and they loved the Horatio Alger stories. Jerry Ford talked about it later in his life, that those stories inspired him to make his way out in the world and to build, what he built over the course of his lifetime. So it's no guarantee if you're born wealthy that you'll be a president. But it's gotten a lot harder if you grew up with not a lot of money to become president today.
Absolutely. I'm chatting with Megan Gorman, who's a wealth manager, tax attorney, and the author of All the President's Money, How the Presidents Who Govern America Govern Their Money. And Megan, I want to bring it to the current times. I know you did a lot of research for this in the midst of our recent presidential campaigns, and you've analyzed the finances of our current incoming commander-in-chief, as well as his opponent, Vice President Harris. What are some of the key differences between their financial situations? Why do those differences, just in general, why should it matter to our listeners?
Yeah, so the reason it should matter to our listeners is how people run their personal finances tells you a lot about their values. We've had presidents who've been slaveholders, who've done things that really gives you a good insight into the fact that maybe they don't have values we'd want to emulate. And so in the recent election, what was really fascinating with Vice President Harris is her finances, as her career got bigger and bigger, got more and more conflict-free. What you saw was someone who divested of anything that was a conflict, like her husband's legal partnerships, and really had a diversified ETF portfolio. She was very organized, very conflict-free. In comparison, Donald Trump, who's our president-elect, when you look at his money, this is someone who really embraces doing very intricate estate and tax planning. Whether you agree with his aggressive positions or not, this is someone who's invested in that. And that's because he's Generation 2. And what I mean by that is most people are Generation 1. His dad was. He's the second generation. And then he's trying to get the money to his kids, G3, or his grandkids, G4. So it's a little bit different than what Vice President Harris had.
Megan, what are some of the key takeaways from the book that can help everyday Americans better manage their own finances? And what's that one piece of advice you want to leave our listeners with?
Yeah. So the two most important decisions you make in your life if you're going to have wealth is what you do for a living and who you marry. And who you marry is really, really important. Just ask Abe Lincoln, who was quite a saver, but his wife was quite the spender. And so what I want people to take away from the book is regardless of the era that they live in, the American dream has always been hard to achieve, but it has never been harder than today. And the affordability crisis, we're not all crazy. It's hard. And we should take comfort in the fact that we will likely find a way out of it, but that it's really requires you to master financial planning to do so.
Amazing. Megan, this has been incredibly insightful. Where can our listeners find your book, All the President's Money, and learn more about your work?
Sure. You can find my book at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and of course your indie bookstores. And you can find me at allthepresidentsmoney.com. So that's where you can find me. And thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, Megan. This has been amazing. Appreciate it. We'll be sure to link in our show notes. And I encourage all of our listeners, what a great time to look at, as we're talking about the inauguration, to look at our presidency and to look at our presidents and look at the history and have that conversation with your families about money. We can learn from the mistakes. We can learn from the successes, and we can apply it in our own lives. Certainly a great message during this holiday season, a great way to, great stocking stuffer, if you will. Well, once again, we'll link in our show notes. And when we come back, we've got a lot more small business jobs and entrepreneurship coming up. Be sure to get in touch with me. I love to hear from our listeners and hear the topics you want to discuss. You can do it by contacting me via my website, syklein.com, and we'll be right back. So don't touch that dial. You're listening to Get Down to Business.